29th, the year is 2002. We are on City Island in New York City, overlooking Long Island Sound. And we are interviewing Anthony Tedeschi, who served as a veteran in World War II. Anthony was born on February 22nd, 1923 in the Bronx. I am the interviewer and cameraman. My name is Paul Zucker. I'm a commander in the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary for New York City. Anthony, thank you very much for spending the time to help us learn a little bit about your experiences during the war. You want to tell me, you were born in the Bronx?
Yes, I was.
And you were brought up and went to school here?
I went to school PS 36 in the Bronx up until 6th grade. On January 27th, 1935, I broke my leg in a sleighing accident, so I had to go to special school, PS 71, which I graduated June 1936. I entered Roosevelt High School in 500 East Fordham Road, where I graduated in June of 1940.
And that was about the time of the war began. How old were you then?
In 1940, I was 17 and a half.
So 17 and a half.
Yes.
And at that point in time, did you want to do something about going into when Roosevelt declared war in 41, I guess?
Oh yeah, I was very interested in the war, and being 17 and a half, I would need my mother's signature to enlist. So I tried to find a job, and my first job was as a library page. Library down in West 100th Street, where I put the books back on the shelves according to the Dewey Decimal System. I repaired books as they instructed me how to do it. Anyway, that was short-lived because as our country was getting closer and closer to the war, they decided to abolish that program and put people into schools where they can train to be mechanics, technicians, etc. I had to pass a small test wiring up a plug, and I got involved with the going to school, radio operator school, conducted by the National Youth Administration.
Okay, so that was what prompted basically your interest in the Signal Corps when you entered into the Army. When did you enlist? And how I got my licenses after studying at the school, radio operator, second class radio telegraph, second class radio telephone, and a Class A amateur license. With those licenses, I had my code speed went up to 35 words per minute. I was able to copy it on a typewriter since I took typing course. You're talking about Morse code?
Morse code, yes. Okay. Then I saw an ad in the paper. The Signal Corps wanted people to train them to become like technicians. I applied for and got the job. We went to school for 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, and I have the course was supposed to end the last week in January 1943. In November of 42, I got a call from the draft board that they were going to induct me. Since I was already going to school for the Signal Corps, I got permission from the school to talk to the draft board and see if I can get an extension, which they granted me. I expected to go into active duty in February of 1943. However, the Signal Corps, which was headquartered, the Army, which was headquartered in Governor's Island, New York, issued me orders. I and 24 others were told to go to Syracuse University for 3 months of pre-radar. We did go there, and after 3 months, the class was over. Again, this was 6 days a week, 8 hours a day. Came back to New York on May 3rd, 1943. I was home for a week. I spent time in an office down in Manhattan with the Signal Corps. Then I got orders to go to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Philco was building radios for the Air Force. They included HF transmitters and VHF, etc. And Anyway, the class ended on July 17th, 1943, and on July 31st, I entered active duty at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Okay.
And at some point in time after your training, you then boarded ships to go to Scotland or England?
Yes, in December 29th, we boarded the United States Army Transport Brazil. This was an ocean liner used in the commercial trade, bringing passengers back and forth to Europe and South America. I was on the promenade deck. It was cold, no lights. Everything was boarded up. There were just blue lights to enable us to see without...
And the reason for that was they were
because of blackouts.
Blackout, because
Yes.
of German submarines.
Right, that's correct. During our voyage, they did fire off a big 5-inch gun, and many times, and the noise was deafening. I really had to go down below to get some
like the rain
relief.
that's falling right now. The rain.
Right.
You hear the noise of the rain.
Right.
I imagine those guns must have been deafening.
Then they fired off the pom-poms, and they
What are
were...
those?
They are anti-aircraft guns, and they fire like this, pump, pump. You know, you can see the puffs of smoke in the sky. But these are for anti-aircraft. Well, anyway, the trip was uneventful. We were in a large convoy. We seemed to be in the middle of it. And
About how many men were on each one of these?
I'd say over 3,000 people were on our boat.
On each ship?
On my boat. I don't know about the other
and
boats.
about how many boats were there?
Oh, many. I couldn't even count them all. Maybe over 50 spread out.
Is that right?
There was
So there might
plenty
be
of them.
15 or 20,000 guys at a time?
Yes, yes.
Going over, huh?
Okay, on January 8th, 1944, we landed in Gaulle, Scotland, on the River Clyde. The twin city of Gaulle is Greenock, which is across the River Clyde. We were on the boat for about 5 days, at which point we disembarked from the boat. We boarded trucks and went to the railhead in Gaulle, boarded a train and headed south to England. We subsequently went to our new base at Wethersfield Army Air Force Base.
And what did you do while you were there?
Well, we set up a shop. I was repairing VHF radios for the 9th Air Force.
Okay.
And what else did we do? Oh, there were other interesting things happened. We were in a farming community. There were cows around there, goats and things like that. And I had an interesting experience. This was after D-Day, when I heard a sound, what sounded like a motorcycle behind me. I moved to the side of the road to let the cyclist go through. When the sound got louder, I turned around, there was no motorcycle. I looked up, there was a V-1 buzz bomb flying right overhead. I watched in awe at the black smoke coming out of the funnel, and as it was moving away, I heard the sound of 2 airplanes, and it was 2 Spitfires, RAF Spitfires, going after it. They did get it because I saw a plume of black smoke in the distant horizon. That's this. I saw black smoke in a distant horizon. The RAF did get the buzz bomb, which was on its way to
Were
London.
you frightened when that thing went over your
No,
head? You
just
curious?
curious. And my first thought was I looked around and there was to see if there was anybody on the company street. No one. And when I got back to my barracks and they come back from lunch, I told them what happened. I says, you know, if that bomb ever hit the mess hall, you guys wouldn't have known what have happened, but you at least would have gone wherever you were going on a full stomach. But
Okay,
anyway,
so from that point then, you at some point in time you went across
around the end of July, well, D-Day,
1944.
44, the end of July, we boarded trucks to a train in Braintree, England, which was the nearest big town to our base, and we ended up in Southampton, England, where we were stayed for about a week or so, waiting for an LCI to bring us to Normandy. While I was there, I saw a lone B-17 which I somehow managed to keep my eyes on it. Thought it was strange. It was flying kind of slow. And I saw a red flare being fired from the plane, followed by a second one, and then a third one. As I'm watching the plane, I see little black specks coming out of the airplane, and then a white parachute opening up. 9 men bailed out of that airplane. What happened to the airplane, where it went, why it was in trouble, I don't know to this day. I may have to do some research to try and find out. It kept flying wherever, probably over water so that it wouldn't hit anybody.
And the men all bailed out safely and were rescued?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so you landed in France and...
Landed in France and Normandy, where we bivouacked for about a week, 2 weeks. And what we were waiting for, which I didn't know at the time, was for Paris to be liberated. Paris was liberated on August 23rd, 1944.
Okay, actually you have something you want to show us. You have a headline.
This is from the Harbor Watch, which I was getting copies of. And when Paris was liberated, C-47s landed at our strip on Normandy and flew us to an airfield in Paris. It could have been Le Bourget, or it could have been Orly Field, I don't know which. But on our way from the field, we had to pass the Champs-Élysées. There was a parade going on, and I saw General Charles de Gaulle and Anthony Eden leading the parade.
Isn't that fascinating? And you have a picture of de Gaulle, right?
Well, I have something here. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I was very surprised to see them. I never expected to see 2 prominent people that I've read in the newspapers and things like that. So that I remember this vividly. I'll never forget this. And I had occasion about a few months later, when I was in Paris attending school, that was on November 11th, 1944. They were going to celebrate the first Armistice Day in Paris in 4 years. They couldn't have done it before because the Germans had occupied Paris and wouldn't permit an Armistice Day celebration. Anyway, Churchill was invited by de Gaulle to attend the ceremony. I was there, and again I saw Winston Churchill, de Gaulle, and Anthony Eden again in a parade along the Champs-Élysées.
And that is a picture of...
This is Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. So you got to see the leaders of the free world, except for
Right.
Roosevelt at that time.
No, I had seen Roosevelt back in 1939 when he came to the Bronx. They dedicated the Whitestone Bridge, which had opened up in time for the 1939 World's Fair, which he also dedicated.
So that's fascinating.
So I saw those 3, well, 4 you might say,
Okay, so
people.
from Normandy then, you then went to where?
We went to Latham, where I repaired radios for the 9th Air Force, VHF radios. And since the 9th Air Force was a tactical air force where they used airplanes that didn't have the range like a B-17, they operated behind the lines, shooting up locomotives, trucks, railroads, bridges, harassed the troops with gunfire. We had A-20 aircraft. It was called the Havoc by the British, which was we then replaced those with A-26s, which were faster aircraft. Anyway, when the front moved, we had to move too, because we had to be closer to the front. At this point, we moved to a town called Laon. Laon is north of Reims. It was at Laon when, on December 15th, the Battle of the Bulge occurred, which lasted a month into January 15th.
That was maybe 50 miles behind the Battle of the Bulge. I mean, within an hour of...
Yes, yes. And on New Year's Eve, around midnight, the air raid sirens sounded, and we left our tents and into the cold, snow on the ground, and we heard the sound of a lone airplane, followed by a loud explosion. It was explained that it was a German airplane tried to bomb the ammunition dump, but missed, and succeeded in killing some MPs that were guarding the ammunition dump. After the all clear sounded, we went back to our cots, and before we could actually get into bed, we heard the sound of an airplane in a power dive with machine guns firing. We ran out of our tents, and we waited there and waited there. There was never another warning, never an all clear. We eventually went back to our cots
So
and went to bed.
during that experience, were you frightened at all at any point in time?
No, not really. For some reason or other, I was never afraid.
How about the guys around you that you were?
Some of them were. Some of them were. And anyway, about a few days later, early in the morning, I was leaving my tent to go to work, and I heard the sound of many airplanes, like the drone of airplanes in the distance. I turned around to see what it was, and it was C-47s and guys bailing out. This, I believe, was the 101st Airborne Paratroopers.
Paratroopers, huh?
Paratroopers.
Yeah.
That were getting ready to engage the enemy. So again, I went back to my tent, didn't think anything more of it, and did my job, period. So after, we stayed there till VE Day, at which point my Lieutenant Kasich, he was in charge of our detachment. He had us.
What rank were you?
I was Staff Sergeant.
Okay.
I had made Staff Sergeant early in 1944, after I had come back from school in Cranwell, RAF training class, which was a refresher on the VHF that I had learned in Philco.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, when VE Day came, we went into Brussels, and we had the day off, and I saw Alfred Linfontaine in a play, and walked around. It was a beautiful day.
So it just felt like it was a normal day, even though the war had just ended and people were out in the streets just living life like it was normal. Huh?
That's correct.
Now let's go back to prior to that, to the prior year. What was life like? Can you explain how it was? What kind of food did you eat? What were your living accommodations? What did you do for entertainment?
Okay. In England, we lived in Nissen huts, and there were about maybe 30 people, 15 on each side, and we had a potbelly stove, and they rationed out coal. Coal was kind of hard to get. Our rations were very good. We had a big mess hall, and we had a lot of Brussels sprouts, and we had pork a lot. On Sundays, they always had chicken, and at night was cold cuts on Sunday night. But I found that the food, to me, was okay. I never complained about it. And we also had the, what do you call it, the chipped beef on toast, which I enjoyed. We had powdered eggs, and I found
it was also when you landed in France at Normandy and all the way through Reims.
No, in Normandy we ate K rations.
Which, you want to explain what that is?
K rations came in a box like a Cracker Jack box, and you opened it up. It had, I think, kind of like wax paper on it to keep it from getting wet, and it had little cheese and crackers and. I don't recall all of it, but it was enough to satisfy your hunger for a little bit. And they did have a place where you can get coffee. In fact, on my trip on the LCI going to Normandy was my first taste of instant coffee when they served that on board the LCI. So anyway, England, getting back to England, when we first got there, it was very cold and damp. And if you ever had the urge to go to the bathroom, many times that was the place. Couldn't get there fast enough, and you no sooner come back and you gotta go again. So that was really disconcerting. While in England, This was on February 22nd, 1944. I and two other members of my detachment we had a weekend pass into London. While there, on my birthday, February 22nd, I had gone to the hotel to go to sleep. My two friends decided to go to a bar, and I declined. I had a headache, which was true. And around 10 o'clock, there's a pounding on the door. And it's my two friends coming back saying, there's an air raid, get downstairs quick. Well, I put my uniform on over my pajamas and ran down to the lobby, and sure enough we heard guns firing, and I looked outside and there was flaming wreckage coming down from an airplane that got hit. A shell casing fell through the glass facade on the hotel, shattering the glass. Everybody ran inside again. According to the Stars and Stripes, the next issue, it was the largest incendiary raid that the Germans conducted over London of the war. And 12 German airplanes were shot down on the English side of the channel. How many was shot down on the other side, didn't say.
So the flaming wreckages that you saw falling out of the sky were these German planes that were hit by
anti-aircraft, yes.
London, huh? Did
Right.
you get a chance to go with the English into their underground tunnels or whatever at any time?
No. I did take the what do you call it, the underground. Yeah, it's very deep. It goes down deep.
During air raids you didn't go?
No. But in London, everything was blacked out. You had to walk really with a flashlight. You couldn't see where you were going. How people knew where they were or how they were going was very mystified me, because I couldn't see a darn thing. Everything was black. You couldn't have a light shining. Buildings and all that were all blacked out. But anyway, we did go to the USO, and we saw some shows, thanks to the USO. And
at the time then that you were over in France and Belgium, what did you have there for food, and what were your living accommodations like and entertainment?
the food was essentially the same that we had in England. And
so you had
we lived in tents. We lived in tents, and it wasn't too bad until it got cold. Then.
Well, yeah, you were there in the Battle of Bulge, which was December, so it was freezing.
Well, we had 8 tents, 4 on one side of the street, 4 on the other side. We had a big wood pile, but we were only allowed to have a fire on one side of the street per night. The next night, the other 4 tents had the fire. So if you wanted to keep warm, you had to go to your neighbor's tent until it was time to go to bed. Then you went back to a very cold bed.
And what did you burn the wood in?
We had a stove, potbelly stove.
In each tent? Oh, yeah.
Each tent had a stove, and we cut up the wood, chopped it up, and put it in the stove, and kept feeding the fire until it was time, like 10 o'clock or whatever, to go back to bed.
Did you the friends you had, or the guys that you were with, did you keep that friendship long afterwards? Were they friends with you?
Well, I still remember their names, and I met one person when I got a job with Pan Am. He also got a job at much later than I was there about a year, and then he showed up, and we reminisced a bit about the war. And anyway, we both got laid off after a period of time. He went to the Navy Yard. I decided to go to school and continue my radio training. After 5 weeks, I got a telegram from Pan Am to come back. But in the meantime, I had gotten a job with Eastern Airlines, was accepted, but never actually reported for work because Pan Am sent the telegram to me, come back to work, which I did. And I stayed with Pan Am for 34 years before I got laid off for the last and final time.
And luckily, because Pan Am went out of business, as I recall.
Yes, they did.
Pan Am was an airline.
Right.
This film may be seen 100 years from now, and people won't remember what Pan Am was. It was an airline.
Pan American World Airways, yes.
Okay, so you used the experience from that you learned, and everything that you learned in the military, that basically for the next 35 years.
That's correct.
So you
Correct.
had that that was a very, very useful thing for you. Was there anything else out of the war that was of use to you that you think, or in any way changed your life?
Well, I did like airplanes, and I liked radio. Prior to going to school, when I graduated high school, I used to go to the library and take books out, and I used to copy circuits and type the explanation and paste it into the book. So that was really my first experience in radio, because I was trying to learn it on my own. Being in high school and not being able to afford to go to school or anything like that, I just picked up books and read them, and got a pretty good feel of what was going on. So.
And then when you went into service in the Army Air Corps, you were able to go to more schools
Right.
and learn that, and that set your career basically for your whole life.
That's correct.
Everything you learned.
Right.
Okay, so you made friendships in the military. Were guys very closely bonded, and did you stick with each other pretty much, or?
Yes, we did. I didn't see. I only saw this one person after that. I never saw anybody else. Some live in Brooklyn. Some live out in Boston, Massachusetts, and.
Have there been any reunions or anything that?
No, none whatsoever. But we had an interesting experience when we went to when we were in Normandy. There was Father Harrington, our chaplain. There was Tom Reardon, one of my buddies. And myself, also one other person, Hal Goodman. He was the radio operator for our outfit, and the chaplain wanted to see the cemeteries where the GIs who had fallen in Normandy were buried. So he had an idea where they were, and the town of St. Mary Gleves was one of the first towns liberated before Paris in France, soon after Normandy, when we got a good foothold on the beach and we were able to advance. Anyway, we walked for hours in the dark, going through fields and things like that.
What year was this now?
1944. This was in August when we were bivouacked in Normandy. So we did this after chow, after we had our dinner, which was actually sea rations.
What are sea rations?
They come in a can, and they heat up a barrel of water, get the water hot, and they put the cans in there, and then you just pick, and you come up with a meal.
What's in the can?
Well, I'm trying to think now. Corned beef hash, and maybe a little bit of meat. I don't know, like chopped meat, and a little cracker.
It could have been that can for a year by then, right?
Yes, and then. I remember having lemonade rather than coffee. I guess they didn't have any coffee anyway. We put our canteen cups in there and got some hot water, and in fact actually it was all lemonade, so that's what we ate and drank. Anyway, we finally found St. Mary Gleves. We found the cemetery, and seeing all the crosses lined up, you can look as far as you can see to it, guys, that must have been a lot of people that died there. Adjacent to that was another cemetery with the Stars of David, and there were many of those too. Anyway, we came back, found our way back to our shelter half. I went back to bed, and I couldn't sleep because my supply sergeant and I shared a shelter half, and he snored so badly, and sleeping on the ground without any mattress and all that, between the two things, was really, you didn't get much sleep. Wasn't
were you affected by seeing all of those men, all of the in the
yes,
cemetery, seeing
yes,
all the?
Yes. There was, in my opinion, the real heroes never came back. They're still there. They never had a chance to tell their story. I read a book on D-Day, and many of them drowned coming off the LCI. They didn't bring the boats in close enough. And these LCTs, landing craft tanks, they actually disembarked in water over their head, carrying all that armament. They just sank to the bottom and didn't have a chance. They drowned, many of them. But
so you were very thankful that you were alive and
yes, yes. It was the most solemn part was when we touched down with the LCI, and we walked in about a foot of water to the beach and then climbed up at Utah Beach. Looking out at the water, there were freighters that were scuttled to form a breakwater so that they can bring in ships and unload them without the surf pounding the ship.
Right.
So anyway, I remember that. Getting back to London, in London, in the daytime, you could see these balloons that they were on cable, and any airplane that tried to come down low would be snared in the sausages that they call them, and would crash. So this is one way London was protecting itself. Mm-hmm. But those were the sights I saw. I remember one time coming back from London, and we stopped at a fish and chips place. Guy had that, you know, like a street vendor, and we bought some fish and chips. And as I'm eating it, this young boy, about 8 or 9 years old, comes up to me and says, "You Yanks are eating all our food." I felt so sorry. It was the last time I had fish and chips in England. I felt bad, you know, that
Sure.
they were starving and we were eating, you know, we ate their food. It's true.
And when you were in France and Europe, you were eating your sea rations and what have you. Did you meet townspeople there? Were they thankful that you were there to help?
Yeah, we used to get thanks, nods, you know. And one thing I did see in Paris was a lot of women without hair in their heads. These were, I forgot what they called them. They were, yeah, they took up with the German soldiers and collaborators. And after the war, the French resistance, the townspeople just shaved their heads off. Shaved their hair off their heads, and they were walking around bald. But when I think of the Parisians, they were better dressed than the English. They had more stylish. The clothes looked like it fit them, whereas in England, the clothes didn't seem to be that good. You know, see, the French were dressed up better than the English, but.
Okay, Anthony, we're going to draw the interview to a close. Is there anything, since this may be seen by future generations, is there anything out of the war, any lessons that you learned that you'd like to pass on to the future generations?
Well, fight for your country, whether it's right or wrong, because in America you got everything you're not going to have in other countries, so protect your country, do your bit. If your country calls you, don't be afraid to serve. You're doing the best thing you can do, because there's no other country in the world that has a way of life that this country has, so protect it for future generations. I don't regret what I did, and if they would take me back now, I would serve in Afghanistan or wherever, Iraq or you name it, I'll be there.
So after 80 years, Anthony, you're still patriotic and still believe that you know, our nation is the finest in the world.
Well, I have one thing to say. I was born on February 22nd, 1923. My middle name is George, for the simple reason George Washington's birthday. My mother named me George in honor of George Washington. So I'm always proud of that, and I feel patriotic because of that.
Well, Anthony, that certainly speaks well for yourself and for our country, and our country honors you and thanks you for your service. This
You're
is
welcome.
the end of our interview.